Captain Daniel Reeves stood by the wide observation window of the diplomatic starship Odyssey, watching the great blue planet Varix 9 rotate below. The world glowed with thin clouds and silver seas, a jewel in the black sky. Humanity had been trying for years to build peaceful relations with the Varexians, a species known for logic, science, and complete control over emotion. For them, feelings were seen as ancient weaknesses, things that once caused wars and mistakes. For Daniel, however, emotions were what made life worth living. The Odyssey had been in orbit for almost a month. Meetings filled every day, and Daniel's patience was being tested. The Varexians discussed every small point of the peace agreement with perfect calm, never raising their voices, never showing joy or frustration. Their faces remained still, smooth, and unreadable. Yet one of them caught Daniel's attention again and again. Her name was Lysera. She was tall, with silver-white skin that seemed to shine faintly in certain light. Her large eyes changed color depending on the light angle, sometimes pale blue, sometimes violet, sometimes almost gold. Her movements were precise, graceful, and deliberate, as if she was always measuring each step and each breath. Daniel often found himself watching her when she spoke. Her voice was calm but curious, as if every word she heard from humans carried a small mystery. Whenever he made a joke to lighten the tense room, the other ambassadors would simply blink, but Lysera would tilt her head slightly, as if trying to understand why humans laughed at things that were not logical. That small reaction fascinated him. One evening, after a long day of negotiations, the human crew prepared a small reception to honor their Varexian guests. Music from Earth played softly in the background. The human diplomats tried to show hospitality, offering simple dishes, soft drinks, and a comfortable atmosphere. The Varexians watched everything with polite interest but little emotion. They were not used to social gatherings. To them, eating was only for survival, not pleasure. Daniel stood near the food table, sipping his drink. When Lysera approached, he smiled warmly. "Ambassador Lysera, are you enjoying the evening?" She looked at him, her eyes faintly glowing with reflected light. "Enjoying, I am." "Observing. You humans gather to share sounds, colors, and scents even when you are not hungry or in need of rest. I do not understand the function." He chuckled lightly. "Maybe it doesn't have a function. We just do it because it feels nice to be together." She considered his words for a moment. "Feels nice," she repeated slowly, as if testing the phrase. "You speak of sensations as values. That is uncommon." Daniel leaned against the table. "We value feelings as much as we value reason. They help us connect with each other. Without them, life would be empty." Lysera looked at him closely. "Empty? Humans often use that word when describing loneliness." He nodded. "Yes, we're social creatures. We need connection. Sometimes we even go out of our way to make it, like asking someone to dinner, for example." Lysera tilted her head again. "Dinner? But we have already eaten." Daniel laughed softly. "I don't mean just eating. I mean sharing time together one-on-one, talking, laughing. On Earth, we call it a date." The word date clearly puzzled her. Her brow furrowed slightly. "You invite another being to consume food with you for emotional exchange?" He grinned. "That's one way to put it." Several nearby ambassadors noticed their conversation and turned with curiosity. Daniel realized that many Varexians were now listening. Still, he didn't stop. Something in him wanted to break through the cold wall of logic surrounding their guests. He looked at Lysera and, without overthinking, asked, "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow evening? Just us, not as ambassadors, but as friends." The room grew quiet. Every human and Varexian present turned their heads toward him. Humans looked surprised. Varexians looked confused. To them, such personal invitations between diplomats were unheard of. Lysera's eyes brightened faintly, shifting from violet to gold. She blinked once, then twice. "You are inviting me to a personal event? For what purpose?" Daniel felt his pulse quicken. "To talk. To learn more about each other. Maybe to show you why humans act the way we do." Lysera studied his face for a long moment. Her expression did not change, but her eyes shimmered faintly like ripples of light under water. "Your request is unusual," she said at last. "However, I am curious. You humans often risk emotional chaos for what you call affection. I wish to understand this, so that's a yes," Daniel asked with a gentle smile. "I accept," she replied softly. "Under one condition. During this date, You will explain why humans value emotion even when it brings pain. He nodded. Deal. For a brief moment, the silence in the hall lifted. Murmurs filled the air. Some humans smiled approvingly. Others whispered warnings about crossing cultural boundaries. The Virexians, however, were quietly fascinated. One of them, a senior counselor, whispered to another, "The human male exhibits irrational behavior, yet the ambassador has agreed. This could lead to new data." When the event ended, Lysera excused herself and walked out gracefully, leaving Daniel standing among his colleagues. His friend and second officer, Lieutenant Harper, approached him with a grin. "Captain, you just asked an alien ambassador on a date in front of the entire delegation." Daniel shrugged, trying to sound casual, though his heart still beat fast. "It's called diplomacy, human style." Harper laughed quietly. "You're either a genius or you just started an interstellar scandal." As the others left, Daniel walked back to his quarters. The corridors of the Odyssey were quiet, lit by soft blue lights. He looked out a viewport at the distant stars and wondered what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know what a Virexian considered a date. He only knew that Lysera was different. There was a spark of curiosity in her that no other Virexian showed. Maybe, just maybe, humanity could reach her heart, or whatever part of her mind handled feelings. The next morning, Daniel woke early and prepared carefully. He asked the ship's culinary AI to create a neutral menu that could be safely consumed by both species. After much searching, they decided on simple vegetable dishes and chocolate dessert. Though the AI warned that Virexians rarely ate sweets, Daniel smiled anyway. That's okay. Maybe she'll like the surprise. Throughout the day, he caught glimpses of Lysera during meetings, but neither mentioned the evening plan. She acted as calm and focused as ever, but Daniel noticed her glances, brief, questioning, as if she was quietly trying to predict what awaited her. As the sun set over Varix 9 below them, Daniel arranged the observation deck. The stars spread like diamonds across the dark, and the glow from the planet illuminated the room. He placed 2 chairs beside a small table and dimmed the lights. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense, but it felt right. Simple, peaceful, human. When the door finally opened, Lysera stepped inside, wearing her formal robe that shimmered like liquid silver. She looked around the room, then at Daniel. "You have altered the environment." He smiled nervously. "Just wanted to make it comfortable. Please, have a seat." She walked slowly to the table and sat down, her movements quiet and careful. "Humans change surroundings to influence emotional comfort," she observed. "We adjust only for efficiency." Daniel poured water into 2 glasses. "Maybe we just like things to feel special." She watched him for a moment, then looked out at the stars. "Your species places value on feelings that have no logical benefit. It fascinates me." "Then tonight," Daniel said gently, "I'll try to show you why." They began to talk, the conversation soft and curious. Lysera asked about laughter, about art, about why humans sometimes cry when they are happy. Daniel answered with honesty, sometimes struggling to put emotions into words. As he spoke, he realized how strange and beautiful it was to explain humanity to someone who had never experienced it. He saw the reflection of the stars in her eyes and wondered if she was truly beginning to understand, or if she was only studying him like a subject in an experiment. After a pause, she said quietly, "Captain Reeves, emotions seem dangerous. They cloud judgment, create mistakes." "They do," Daniel admitted, "but they also give us courage. They help us care about something bigger than ourselves." Lysera looked thoughtful. "Perhaps that is what your people call hope." "Yes," he said. "Exactly that." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the stars. Something unspoken passed between them, a faint sense of connection, fragile but real. When the clock chimed, Lysera stood slowly. "This experiment will continue tomorrow. There is much I do not yet understand." Daniel smiled softly. "I'll be ready." As she walked away, the door sliding shut behind her, Daniel let out a slow breath. He didn't know if what had just happened was diplomacy, friendship, or something entirely new. But one thing was certain. For the first time in history, a human had invited a Virexian on a date, and she had said yes. Daniel Reeves spent most of the next day in quiet preparation. He had faced space pirates, asteroid storms, and impossible peace treaties, but somehow the idea of having dinner with Lysera made him more nervous than any of those things. He kept reminding himself that it was only dinner, yet deep inside he knew it was more than that. This evening could be the first real step toward understanding between two very different species. He checked the table setting for the third time. The observation deck of the Odyssey looked peaceful, filled with soft starlight. He had arranged everything as simply as possible. 2 chairs, a round table, a small lamp casting a gentle golden glow. No music, no loud decoration, just quiet beauty. On the table sat 2 plates, each containing a meal designed by the culinary AI to suit both species. The main dish was a blend of vegetables and proteins prepared without spices that might harm the Virexian system. For dessert, there was a small bowl of chocolate pieces, Earth's most universal comfort food. At exactly 1900 hours, the doors opened with a soft hiss, and Lysera entered. Her long robe shimmered like liquid silver, reflecting the soft light of the room. Her glowing eyes examined every part of the setting before they rested on Daniel. "You have prepared this space carefully," she said, her voice calm but curious. "I wanted it to be comfortable," Daniel replied with a warm smile. "Not too formal. Just a place to talk," she nodded once. "I can see that. The colors and light are calming. Is that intentional?" "Yes," he said. "Humans often change their surroundings to match their feelings. Light and color help us relax." Lysera moved closer and touched the edge of the table, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers. "You create emotional responses through environment. Fascinating." Daniel gestured toward the chair. "Please sit." She sat gracefully, folding her hands in front of her. "Tell me, Captain Reeves," she began, "what exactly is the purpose of this event?" "I wish to understand what humans call a date." He thought for a moment before answering. "A date is when 2 people spend time together because they want to know each other better. Sometimes it leads to friendship, sometimes something deeper. It's not a mission or a duty. It's personal." Lysera tilted her head slightly. "Personal. A word you humans use often. It means something connected to emotion and identity, correct?" "That's right," Daniel said. "It's about sharing who we are." The AI service robot entered quietly and placed the dishes in front of them. Lysera examined the food with interest. "Your nutrition presentation is artistic. My people view food as simple fuel. You make it symbolic," he smiled. "Food brings people together. We celebrate, mourn, and connect around it. It's one of the oldest traditions we have." Lysera picked up a utensil imitating his movements and tasted a small portion. Her expression did not change, but the colors in her eyes flickered faintly. "Pleasant texture," she said. "Flavor is complex," Daniel laughed softly. "That's a good sign." They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments, then Lysera spoke again. "Tell me, Captain, why do humans risk emotional instability for connection? You said yesterday that feelings make life meaningful, yet emotions often bring conflict." Daniel leaned back slightly, thinking. "Because emotions are part of who we are. They make us try harder, dream bigger, and care about things that logic alone would ignore. Yes, emotions cause pain sometimes, but they also create love, creativity, and courage. Without them, we wouldn't explore the stars at all." Lysera studied him closely. "You believe emotion gives purpose?" "Yes, we build, fight, and hope because we feel. Our history is full of mistakes, but also miracles. Every great step humanity has taken began with someone who felt something deeply. Curiosity, love, even fear." She was silent for a long moment, processing his words. "On Varex we removed emotion long ago," she said quietly. "Our ancestors believed it was a disease that caused destruction. Logic was our cure, but as I study your species I begin to wonder if perhaps logic alone is incomplete." Daniel's gaze softened. "Maybe emotions aren't diseases. Maybe they're colors of the mind. Without them everything would be gray." Lysera's eyes shifted faintly from blue to violet. "You speak in metaphors. That is an emotional language form, yes?" He nodded with a small grin. "Exactly. It helps us describe things that words alone can't explain." "Then your entire species communicates beyond facts," she said, sounding almost amazed. "You build meaning on uncertainty." "That's one way to put it," Daniel agreed. "We live by stories and feelings as much as by science." They continued their conversation as stars drifted silently beyond the glass. Daniel spoke about Earth, its oceans, music, laughter, and storms. Lysera listened carefully, asking precise questions, but he could sense a growing softness in her tone. For the first time, she didn't sound like a scientist analyzing data. She sounded like someone trying to feel what he was describing. Finally, he offered her a small piece of chocolate. This is something special to humans. We give it to friends or loved ones. It's a symbol of warmth and care. She took the small piece carefully, examining it as if it were a mysterious artifact. It seems ordinary. Try it, Daniel said gently. Lysra placed it on her tongue. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her eyes flickered rapidly through shades of blue and gold. She sat very still, as if her mind was processing thousands of signals at once. "This is strange," she whispered. "The flavor activates multiple sensory pathways. It creates warmth. My body temperature is rising slightly. My heart rate as well." Daniel chuckled softly. "That's called pleasure. It's supposed to feel good." She looked at him with quiet amazement. "Pleasure is considered a distraction among my people. But this sensation feels meaningful." "Maybe," Daniel said gently. "That's what humans have been trying to tell you. Feelings can be meaningful." For the first time since he met her, Lysera's lips curved upward in the smallest, faintest smile. It was barely visible, but it was real. "Captain Reeves," she said softly, "you are an unusual representative of your kind. Most diplomats speak in careful terms. You speak from emotion," he smiled back. "Maybe because that's the only language I really know." They sat together for a long while, watching the galaxy stretch endlessly beyond the glass. There was no need for more words. The silence felt comfortable, not empty. Lysra seemed lost in thought, her glowing eyes reflecting the stars. At last she spoke again. "When I first arrived on this vessel, I saw humans as unstable. I thought your kind lacked control. But now I see something else. You live with uncertainty yet continue to reach forward. That is admirable." Daniel felt something warm spread in his chest. "Thank you." "We try." Lysra turned toward him, her voice quiet but steady. "I have learned something tonight. You do not chase emotion only for pleasure. You chase it for connection, to feel seen, understood, and valued." "I think I am beginning to understand that." He met her gaze. "That's all we really want. To be understood." She nodded slowly, then looked back at the stars. "When you asked me yesterday why I agreed to this date, I said I wanted to understand why humans risk emotional chaos. Now I think I see. You risk it because the connection is worth more than the pain." Daniel smiled softly. "Exactly." They sat in peaceful silence again, the stars gleaming beyond the window. Time passed unnoticed until the soft hum of the ship's clock reminded them it was late. Lysra stood, her silver robe catching the starlight. "Captain Reeves, this experience has been enlightening. I feel different, though I cannot yet define how." "That's part of the magic," he said with a grin. "You don't always need to define it. Sometimes it's enough just to feel it." Lysra looked thoughtful. On Varric, such uncertainty would be considered weakness, but perhaps it is strength instead. She began to walk toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. "There is a word in your language, hope. It means belief without proof. I think I understand that word now." Daniel's heart warmed at her words. "I'm glad you do." As the doors opened and she stepped into the hallway, her last words floated back to him. "Thank you for showing me what it means to feel, Captain Reeves. Tomorrow the council will meet again. Perhaps I will see the world differently now." When she was gone, Daniel sat back in his chair, staring out at the stars. He didn't know what tomorrow's meeting would bring, or what her people would decide about the treaty. But he knew one thing for certain. Something had changed tonight. Lysra had tasted not only human food, but the human heart. For the first time she had truly felt, and that simple spark might be enough to change everything between their two worlds. Daniel smiled to himself, whispering softly, "One small dinner for two people, one giant step for understanding." He looked out at the shining planet below, feeling both hope and wonder. Somewhere deep inside, he knew the universe had just shifted, quietly, gently, beautifully. A week had passed since the dinner between Captain Daniel Reeves and Lysra, the Varexian ambassador. The Odyssey continued to orbit Varex 9, still waiting for the final decision on the peace treaty. Tension hung in the air like an invisible weight. Every crew member felt it. The meetings were longer, and the discussions sharper. Both sides had worked for months to reach a balance, yet one disagreement threatened to undo everything. The Varexian Council was set to vote soon. If they rejected the treaty, humanity's chance for alliance would vanish. Many of the crew feared the Virexians' logical nature would never accept the emotional unpredictability of human beings. But Daniel had hope. He had seen a change in Lysera during their dinner. Her voice had softened, her eyes had shown warmth, and her curiosity had grown. Something in her had shifted, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. That morning, Daniel sat in his quarters reading reports on his tablet when the door chimed. "Enter," he said. The door slid open and Lysera stepped inside wearing her usual shimmering robe. "Ambassador Lysera," he greeted, standing up. "What brings you here?" "I wished to speak with you privately before the council meeting," she said. Her tone was calm, but Daniel noticed a faint tremor in her voice. It wasn't fear exactly, more like uncertainty. "Of course," he said, gesturing for her to sit. She remained standing. "Captain Reeves, I have been thinking about our conversation, about emotion, and about your word, hope." Daniel listened carefully. "My people believe that decisions should never depend on feelings," Lysera continued. "But since our dinner, I find myself questioning that belief. When I tasted your food, when I listened to your words, something awakened in me. At first I thought it was a physical reaction, but it has not gone away. I find myself remembering the way you described humanity, with courage, imperfection, and heart. And now I ask myself, can logic alone truly build peace?" Daniel smiled gently. "I think logic can build walls, but only emotion can build bridges." Lysera looked down for a moment. "If I express such thoughts before my council, they may call me corrupted. They may remove me from my post." He stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "Then maybe it's time someone challenged them. You've seen for yourself what emotion can bring. Understanding, compassion, friendship." She looked up, her eyes glowing faintly violet. "And pain as well. I feel uncertainty, and yet it does not feel wrong." "That's part of it," Daniel said. "Feeling means being alive." Lysera studied him in silence for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "I think I know what I must do." Later that day, the council meeting began in the grand hall of the Virexian capital. The room was made of shining crystal walls that reflected soft light from above. The human representatives, including Daniel, sat on one side of a curved table. The Virexians sat opposite, calm and expressionless as always. The chief counselor, Elder Vorin, spoke first. "We are gathered to conclude the matter of the human treaty. The final vote will determine whether the Virexian alliance will recognize humanity as partners, or declare them unpredictable and unfit for cooperation." His words echoed through the hall. Daniel remained silent, his hands folded calmly, though his heart pounded. He glanced toward Lysera, seated among her people. Her face was composed, but her hands rested tightly on the table. One by one, the council members presented their arguments. Most of them were against the treaty. They spoke about human wars, their emotional instability, and their impulsive decisions. "Humans are guided by feelings," one elder said coldly. "They cry, they laugh, they love, and they hate, all without control. How can we trust such creatures with interstellar power?" Daniel clenched his jaw but stayed silent. This was their moment to speak. Then at last, Elder Vorin turned toward Lysera. "Ambassador Lysera, you were assigned to study the humans directly. We value your analysis. Share your conclusion." Lysera stood slowly. The light from above caught her silver robe, making it shimmer faintly. When she spoke, her voice was steady but carried a new tone, a quiet strength Daniel had not heard before. "My analysis began with observation," she said. "Humans are emotional, yes. They are unpredictable, yes. But these traits are not weaknesses, they are the source of their resilience." The council members shifted slightly, exchanging silent looks. Elder Vorin frowned. "Resilience? Explain." Lysera took a deep breath. "When a human feels pain, they do not collapse, they rise. When they lose, they try again. When logic says something is impossible, their emotions make them attempt it anyway. That is how they reached the stars. That is how they survived countless hardships." Her words echoed softly in the hall. Daniel felt his chest tighten with pride. Lysera continued, "I once believed emotion was chaos, but now I understand it is creation. It drives art, discovery, and empathy. It allows them to see others not as subjects to study, but as friends, and in this friendship I see the possibility of peace." There was a long silence. One of the elders finally spoke. "Ambassador Lysera, your words suggest you have been influenced by the humans." She turned toward him, her eyes glowing faint gold. I have not been influenced. I have been enlightened. The room filled with quiet murmurs. No Virexian had ever spoken so emotionally in public. It was a shocking sight. Her eyes glowed more brightly now, reflecting colors: violet, blue, silver. The colors of feeling. Elder Vorin looked disturbed. You display emotional signs, Ambassador. Is that deliberate? Yes, she said simply. For the first time, I am not hiding what I feel. The room fell silent again. Even the human diplomats seemed breathless. Lizra turned slightly toward Daniel and the human team. When Captain Reeves invited me to a human custom called a date, I accepted as part of my study. But during that time, I discovered something beyond logic. I discovered that peace is not built by systems or numbers. It is built by understanding hearts. And humans, for all their flaws, understand hearts better than any species I have met. A faint wave of murmuring spread across the council. Elder Vorin raised his hand for silence. You speak of emotion as though it were a virtue. Lysera nodded. It is. Emotion connects us to meaning. Without it, we are machines. Without it, we cannot truly care for peace. The elder's voice hardened. And what if emotion leads us to mistakes? Lysera met his gaze steadily. Then we learn from those mistakes. That is what humans do. That is what I now choose to do. Daniel watched her, admiration shining in his eyes. He knew she was risking everything. The council could dismiss her, perhaps even exile her. But she stood firm. At last, Elder Vorin sighed deeply. Very well. We will proceed with the vote. One by one, the council members cast their votes through small crystal panels that glowed faintly as each decision was made. Daniel held his breath as the colors appeared. Blue for rejection, gold for acceptance. 1 gold. 2 blues. Another blue. Then 2 golds. It was even. The final vote was Lysera's. She placed her hand on the panel. The crystal glowed gold. Elder Vorin looked at the result and then back at her. The vote is tied. As Chief Elder, I must cast the final decision. He touched his own panel and it shone gold. The treaty passes, he announced quietly. The Virexian Alliance will partner with humanity. A murmur of astonishment filled the hall. Daniel let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The human diplomats exchanged relieved glances. For the first time, the impossible had happened. 2 species had reached understanding. When the meeting ended, Lysera approached Daniel. Her usual calm expression was still there, but her eyes glowed softly, warm and alive. Captain Reeves, she said, do you know what I told my people tonight? He smiled. That emotions make us human? She shook her head gently. I told them that emotions make us alive. Daniel's voice was quiet. You did more than speak, Lysera. You changed history. She looked at him for a long moment. Perhaps. But I did not do it alone, he smiled. No, you didn't. Lysera hesitated, then added in a softer tone. When we first met, I did not understand why humans take emotional risks. Now I know. Some connections are worth any risk. Daniel felt warmth rise in his chest. So, what does that mean? She looked at him with a faint smile, the same small, gentle curve of her lips that had surprised him once before. It means, Captain Reeves, that my answer to your invitation has not changed. I would still like to have dinner with you again. He laughed softly. I'll take that as a yes. As the stars outside the crystal dome glimmered, the first bond between logic and emotion, between 2 distant worlds, had been formed. And at its heart stood a human and an alien woman who had learned that understanding doesn't begin with logic. It begins with a single, genuine connection. Months had passed since the decisive council meeting. Humanity and the Virexian Alliance were no longer strangers. They were partners. Trade routes had opened, cultural exchanges had begun, and joint scientific programs flourished. For the first time in centuries, 2 species had found common ground, and at the heart of it, Captain Daniel Reeves and Lysera had played an unexpected but crucial role. Daniel walked through the corridors of the Odyssey, the ship now converted into a joint exploration vessel with both human and Virexian crew. He paused to observe the humans at work, the engineers adjusting complex systems with laughter and chatter, the scientists debating theories passionately. Nearby, Virexian crew members observed carefully, taking notes, asking questions, and for the first time, engaging in discussions that were not strictly logical. Some of them even smiled, tiny, hesitant gestures but real. Lysra appeared beside him, moving with her usual grace. She was wearing the uniform of a joint mission officer, the silver robe replaced with a fitted suit that allowed freedom of movement. Her eyes shifted gently in color, a subtle violet mixed with gold, the signs of a mind alive with thought and feeling. "Captain Reeves," she said, her voice calm but carrying an unusual warmth. "It is remarkable to see how your species' influence is spreading." Daniel smiled. "I think it's more than just influence. You're teaching them too. Look at how your people are learning to adapt, to ask questions, to feel even a little." Lysra's gaze drifted toward the observation deck, where a group of young Virexian cadets practiced piloting simulations alongside human students. "It is new. They are tentative yet curious. I see subtle shifts in their neural patterns, changes that suggest emotional engagement. It is unexpected and enlightening." Daniel chuckled softly. "I told you once, hope and curiosity go a long way. You just needed a little push." She tilted her head, a soft smile touching her lips. "Perhaps. But I have learned more from you than I have from any lecture, report, or observation. You did not simply teach me. You allowed me to understand on my own terms." He looked at her with quiet pride. "That's what humans do best. We help each other see beyond what's obvious." Their conversation paused as the ship's communication console beeped. A message from the Planetary Alliance Council appeared on the screen. They were ready to approve the first joint mission between human and Virexian crews to explore a nearby uncharted star system. Daniel glanced at Lysra. "This is it," he said. "Our first real step into uncharted space together. Are you ready?" Lysra's eyes glimmered, as ready as one can be when leaving the safety of known space. "I feel anticipation, and perhaps a small trace of excitement," Daniel grinned. "I'd call that progress." That evening, the observation deck became their makeshift dining area once again. This time it was informal, filled with soft hums from the ship's systems and the twinkling stars outside. Daniel had prepared a simple meal, much like their first dinner, though both of them had learned to adapt. Lysra tried a human drink, fruit juice, and found it surprisingly pleasant. As they ate, they spoke of their past months, of small victories and surprising discoveries. Lysra described how her people were beginning to question old teachings, how young Virexians were experimenting with emotional expression, and how some had even started to write poetry. Daniel shared tales of human ingenuity, of cities built in impossible places, and of explorers who reached worlds that seemed unreachable. "Captain Reeves," Lysra said after a pause, "I never believed that my people could learn from humans. I thought logic alone was sufficient, but I see now that our perspectives, when combined, create something greater than either of us alone." Daniel nodded. "That's the beauty of partnership. Two minds, two species working together, emotions and logic in harmony. We can do things neither of us could do alone." Lysra's eyes softened. "I owe much of this realization to you. Your invitation, your willingness to share your world. It opened a path I did not know existed. I feel gratitude beyond what I can quantify." Daniel reached across the table, a simple gesture that surprised her but did not startle. "Lysra, I am glad. I hoped you would understand, but seeing you realize it on your own, that's even better." A soft pause followed. Outside the observation deck, the stars stretched endlessly. Daniel felt the same awe he always felt when looking at space. The vastness, the possibilities, the sense of being part of something much larger than himself. And now, beside him, stood someone who could see that vastness not only with her mind but with her emerging heart. "I have thought about something," Lysra said quietly, "about how humans experience relationships. You spoke of connection, affection, and friendship, but there is something deeper you hinted at during our first meeting." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And what is that?" She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "Humans allow vulnerability. You trust others with parts of yourself that are fragile, uncertain. That is terrifying, yet you do it willingly. And in doing so, you create bonds that logic alone cannot form. I have tried to replicate such a connection, but only now do I believe I understand its power." Daniel smiled gently. "That's exactly right. And it's not easy. It takes courage, patience, and a willingness to take risks. But the rewards are worth everything." Lysra's eyes shifted to gold, a sign that her neural pathways were processing more than logic. It was reflection, emotion, and understanding. Then perhaps the treaty, the missions, the partnerships, They are all forms of trust. Humans risk uncertainty to gain connection. I understand that now, Daniel nodded. You do more than understand. You're living it. You showed your people that trust and hope can coexist with logic. That's what makes this alliance possible. For a long moment, neither spoke. The galaxy outside sparkled with countless stars, silent witnesses to this new bond between two species. Then Lysera spoke again, softer this time. Captain Reeves, when I first accepted your invitation, I did not know what I would gain. I thought it would be study, data, observation, but now I realize it was more. I learned to see not just with my mind, but with my entire being. You taught me that connection is not weakness, it is strength. Daniel's chest felt full. He had hoped to show her something of humanity, but he had not expected the impact to be so profound. Lysera, you taught me too. You reminded me that understanding someone else's perspective, truly understanding it, is its own adventure. That's why we explore, isn't it? To discover new worlds and new minds. Her eyes glimmered, a subtle mix of curiosity and warmth. Yes, that is why we explore. And now we explore together. The hum of the ship, the glow of distant stars, and the gentle scent of the meal created a quiet, serene atmosphere. It was not the grandeur of a diplomatic gala or the intensity of the council chamber. It was simply two beings sharing a moment of understanding, bridging the gap between their worlds. Daniel reached for a small piece of chocolate, holding it out to her. Would you like to try another? Lysera hesitated for a moment, then took it. Yes, this time I wish to experience it fully with awareness of its meaning. She tasted it slowly, savoring the unfamiliar sensations. Daniel watched her, seeing the subtle shifts in her expression, the faintest hint of delight, a trace of wonder. He realized that she was learning to embrace the human way of feeling, in her own time, in her own way. When she finished, she looked at him quietly. Captain Reeves, I cannot predict the future, but I can say this. What we have begun, this connection, this understanding, it has changed me. And I think it may change others as well. He smiled softly. That's all I could ever hope for. As the evening drew to a close, Lysera stood. She moved with the same graceful certainty as always. Yet there was a warmth to her presence that had never existed before. Tomorrow we depart on the first mission, she said. I feel anticipation, but also trust. You humans place much in hope. Perhaps it is wise to do the same. Daniel extended a hand not as a formality, but as a gesture of partnership. Then we face it together. She took his hand briefly, her grip firm but calm. Together, she echoed. As they looked out the observation window at the vastness of space, Daniel felt a deep sense of purpose. Humanity had achieved many great things, space travel, technology, diplomacy. But the greatest achievement, he realized, was connection. The bridge between two worlds built not by weapons or contracts, but by understanding, courage, and heart. Lysera's eyes glimmered beside him, a living testament to the power of hope and the strength of connection. And Daniel knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, unexplored star systems, unknown dangers, or cultural obstacles, they would face them as partners, united in trust, respect, and shared curiosity. As the stars stretched into infinity, the message was clear. The future belonged not just to humans or Virexians, but to those who dared to understand, to connect, and to embrace both logic and feeling. And at the heart of that future stood two unlikely companions. Proof that the smallest gesture, a dinner, a conversation, a shared chocolate, could change the course of history and the course of the heart. Daniel turned to Lysera and whispered softly, "Shall we begin the next adventure?" She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with light and wonder. "Yes, Captain Reeves, let us begin." And with that, the Odyssey set course for the unknown, carrying with it not just explorers of space, but pioneers of understanding, trust, and hope.